Good afternoon, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here. Here meaning not in this building because I work here. Here being in front of this wonderful crowd and being with the wonderful colleagues working on this important issue. For the sake of full disclosure, I have to tell you why I'm here. I'm here because I was picked as a volunteer by Professor David Orden. I have 4 minutes to talk about the implication of these policies for developing countries. And I'll try to make only 3 points. Here I go, my first point. This is about the European Union cap. If you look at it, what you see is it has become greener over time. When you look at the 2014 onward, it's really green, which is a good thing. Because a lot of the distorting effects like the red color, blue color, amber color, they have disappeared, which is really a good thing. And I'm sure colleagues at the WTO and other colleagues in trade have taken great care in defining these boxes. But when you ask the question to a developing country policymakers or in a forum there, how are they going to look at these changes in color? I think they are going to look at like this. It was a multicolored situation. There was a lot of red, blue, and yellow. And from there, we have moved to a greener box. So there are accomplishments in there. But the bottom line, the way they might look at, the way I perceive, is this. Moving from multicolored box to a greener box with the same sack of euros. Because you saw that the total support has not declined. And that will be the talking point in the developing country context. Now, coming to the US, 2014, how our colleagues, the policymakers in the developing countries, going to react? I think initially there will be a state of confusion. They will be asking, is it subsidy for the farmers or are we supporting insurance companies? Because insurance has become a big component of the 2014 bill. And then there might be a moment of aha moment. Aha moment is when colleagues like David Orden and Carl Joloff and Vince Smith explain that no, it's a total cost is going to remain about 80% of it. It might even go up. Then people will say, aha, I got it. So it's the same old thing. And there can be a second aha moment where they can say, well, it's an insurance. And there has been a lot of talk about introducing weather-based insurance in developing countries. Peter Hazel, who has done wonderful work in the 80s, then again very recently in 2010 for IFPRI, looked at some of these insurance programs in developing countries. And his conclusion broadly is these are all pilots, mostly funded by the donors. So they have not taken root yet because the fundamentals for improving this kind of insurance or instituting insurance are not there in most of these developing countries. But there are other things I think we need to look at. When David presented and Christoph presented, there are a lot of good things in it too. And a lot of the discussion about the US support or Europe support in the context of developing countries, we miss out those points about the conservation and other things. I'll come to that a bit later. My second point, on the subsidy rationalization, David pointed out that are these based on the argument of market failure? I think that's going to be very difficult to solve. Because still in developing countries, you go to Malawi, Tanzania, anywhere, you have to walk 2 hours to get to a rural household. That's where you see the real market failures in the context of economic theories. Then what kind of market failures are we talking about in the US or EU? There is a talk about the systemic risk. I think we have to ask more questions. What do we mean by systemic risk? Are these insurable risk or uninsurable risk? Hurricane Katrina was not insurable risk. That's why you have FEMA. And Hurricane Sandy was not insurable risk. That's why you have FEMA. So, and when you're talking about drought, are we talking about drought in Iowa or are we talking about drought in the entire country? When you talk about a developing country, I go to a small country, say Bangladesh, a small country, a drought is a drought. It affects the entire country. But in the context of the European Union or the US, it's difficult to make that point. But we all know that it is a political economy argument. David pointed out farm lobby is strong. We understand that. That is a big point. And maybe there are bigger reasons behind it, why that political lobby is strong. Maybe because of the vulnerability of the global food system. And we need to think about that. All right, my third point. subsidies in developing countries. I think this is, for many of you, obvious, but I think it's a really important point that we ought to be looking in our profession at IFPRI and similar organization. I have 1 minute. So, how many of you have heard this argument? If EU and US can subsidize their agriculture, what is wrong us, developing countries, helping our farmers? You hear that a lot. And I think that is a misguided and self-defeating argument. It is misguided because there are a number of other areas where these scarce public resources can be effectively utilized. In Malawi, 50 to 70% of the public spending on agriculture went to their so-called smart subsidy program. In Indonesia, they eliminated all input subsidies, fertilizer subsidies, in 98, 99. In 2008, it went to $1.8 billion. If you compare that with the increase in consumption of fertilizer, you don't see much changes. So argument is misplaced argument. There are much more important things to be done. And at IFPRI, you had a wonderful researcher looking into this, but he decided to become a manager. If you know who I'm talking about, that's my Director General, Cheng and Fan. Thank you very much.